in what he did, and then maybe the Manet, the wealthy industrialist, felt some sort of sense of guilt over watching what was happening to the Jews in Paris. That probably played into it a bit.
The opposites in this book are fascinating. There's the beauty of Paris, and there's the horror that's going on. And it's as if the two worlds were colliding, and they were. And did you think about that, and did you think about how you could convey that, or was that just something that happened, showed up?
Well, the beauty of Paris, the streets and everything, and then you have like the scenes of torture by the Gestapo, where they do unspeakable things to get people to talk. That played out in my mind while I was writing the story. The two contrasts like that, what was going on, sort of behind closed doors, and the torture.
All in all, it's a morality tale. You ask your reader to ask themselves what they will do under the circumstances Lucien finds himself in, and I imagine we would all hope to find our better selves, but we don't always. And right?
It's easy to think that you would be a hero now and do something like that. But if you were in people's places during the Second World War, you would be, scared for your own life and scared for your family's life. So, in 2014, it's easy to think that you would help somebody. But if you were placed back in that time period, you might not want to get involved at all.
Not having the courage to get involved. Sleeping with the enemy. Term, by the way, as your character Adele did. What were your thoughts on her? And there always seems to be this self-motivation, and Lucien too, involved.
Adele, the fashion designer, she was based on Coco Chanel, who supposedly slept with German officers during the Second World War, and she basically thought they would win the war and there wouldn't be any consequences for what she did.
But again, it gets into this moral thing and what's right, what's wrong. I have to tell you, sidebar, you did that business about Nazi uniforms, and I found that utterly fascinating, how even that could be turned into something. It was just a bizarre thing to describe, the SS officer's uniform and everybody else's, right? Could you understand that kind of like just, it was, I wanted to take a bath after that scene. Stuff you stood up against the Nazis, and you mentioned your character, Father Jacques. He refused to be intimidated by the Gestapo colonel interrogating him. But why is it always, do you think, in books, in films, in everything that has to do with that it's always the priest or somebody of a spiritual nature who is the one who stands up?
Well, his inspiration was I discovered that there were lots of French priests in this period who risked their lives hiding Jewish children. That was another big surprise. And so that it really interested me. So I decided to create a character, based on that. But, it's, I guess it goes with the territory being, a priest or a minister or a rabbi that you have this, different sense of morality and, different sense of courage there. But you're right, in books and in movies, the religious guy always has the high ground there.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that's always true in life. Here's another question about that. Writing about Nazis. I just finished watching The Winds of War and War and Remembrance and rereading the book, Herman Wouk's brilliant historical drama. I don't know if you've ever read it, about World War II. Going back and looking at that and rereading that, he's one of the few people that I really saw who had an interesting take on how he portrayed the Nazis. And I'm wondering whether you thought about that when you were writing this, because they look, we don't know, we weren't there, how they were, but, Hitler is always portrayed as this he was mad, but, screaming, ranting lunatic. Nazis always seem to be portrayed, as Achtung and tough and whatever. And it's almost a caricature, and yet maybe it's not a caricature. And maybe that's one of the weirdest things about looking back, these many years, later at those. But that's what filmdom has done to them. What are your thoughts, any, as a writer, on portraying them?
I kept that in mind when I was writing the book, because I wanted sort of a more sympathetic German officer, and that's why I created the character of Herzog, the German engineer, army engineer. I'd come across this fact that this German officer had kept a diary during the war, and in it, he said how humiliated and embarrassed he was the way the Germans, treated the Jews, rounding them up, and he was guilt-ridden about that, and very ashamed. So I took that little fact and I spun a character off on that, and I wanted a German who wasn't the stereotypical, foaming at the mouth monster. I wanted one who was more cultured, better educated, and more sympathetic, and I wanted him to form a friendship with Lucien the architect, to have sort of a bond during the war there, during their experiences there. But that's a good point, that film always portrays Nazis and the Germans as monsters, and so I wanted to try to avoid that in the book.
Yeah, and they were monsters. There's no question about that. It's a monster, though, can be somebody who is not a screaming lunatic, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, and regardless of whether somebody is a nice guy or not a nice guy, in this lady's mind anyway, anybody who stood by and watched for whatever reason is guilty and is disgusting as far as I'm concerned. But that's, what can I say? That's me. You get to the end of this project of yours, and you've lived with these characters, and you've lived in this world. I don't know, how long did it take you to write this?
I think the first draft was like less than a year, and then I just kept working on it over a couple more years before I went out and found a literary agent. Right.
So you write the words at the end. How'd you feel?
Yeah, I wanted to let the architect escape. That was important to me, and I had just gotten to that point, and I didn't feel I had to write anymore, and I just wanted to end the story right there.
And you were done.
So,
purged.
Yeah. So and I didn't have any need later on to rewrite the ending or add something to the ending there. I wanted to just close it out.
I've been speaking with Charles Belfoure, architect and author of The Paris Architect, by way of Source Books, a novel rich with an intriguing cast of characters, a literary painting of Paris under the occupation. For more information on his book and the author, visit his website at www.theparisarchitect.com. Before I go, I want to remind everyone that podcasts of current and past shows are always available to listen to free on iTunes under The Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show is also available for download via Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, BlogTalkRadio.com, and a host of other venues. Google The Halli Casser-Jayne Show, and you will find us. Of course, podcasts of our shows, both past and present, are always posted for your listening pleasure at HalliCasser-Jayne.com, which I hope you'll visit often for the latest information on our upcoming segments. Oh, and while you're at HalliCasser-Jayne.com, don't forget to visit my blog to read my latest musings. I'll be back next week, same time, 3 p.m. Eastern, for another edition of the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, talk radio for fine minds, brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download at www.audibletrial.com/The Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Audible.com features over 100,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Stay in touch, won't you? Remember, that's HalliCasser-Jayne.com. Discover us on Facebook at Halli Casser-Jayne and on Twitter at HallieCJ. I love to hear from you. So, till we meet again, this is Halli Casser-Jayne. It's a wrap.